Hey everyone, it's Kyle. Today we are going over the differences between third-party shells and Nintendo shells, and if using a third-party shell might be right for you, if you're on a budget, or you just want to save some money over using a Nintendo shell. While we're doing this, I am reshelling my son's Gamecube controller from a third-party shell to a first-party shell, and we'll get into why in a second. But first, I want to talk about the two major brands that are available for the third-party shells. And these two brands are Extreme Rate and Datafrog. The Datafrog shells are cheaper than the Extreme Rate shells, and these are the only third-party shells I've really had experience with. So there may be some carryover with Extreme Rate, but I have read on the custom Gamecube Controller Discord that the Extreme Rate shells are typically a bit nicer, but they are $20 versus the $3 price tag of the Datafrog shells. So if you're really jonesing for a different colored shell, but you don't want to buy a Nintendo shell, Extreme Rate may be what you're looking for. But we're mostly talking about my experience with the Datafrog shells today. Maybe we'll do some more on Extreme Rate another time. One of the first things you'll notice with the Datafrog shell is the texture of the plastic and the feel of the plastic. It's definitely a different plastic just based off of how it feels. And the shell is a lot more textured than the original shell. Even the new Smash Ultimate shells, which tend to have more texture than the older ones, these third-party ones just are way more textured. So they do feel quite a bit different. And if you're a texture sensitive person, it's definitely something to take into account. Now let's talk about the differences in the front shell, because that's where most of the differences are. The main reason why I am switching from the blue on blue on blue shell that my son requested originally is because he realized he didn't like the feel of the buttons after I pointed it out to him, and he wanted a Nintendo shell after that. The first thing is you're going to have to make some cuts to the front shell on these Datafrog shells in order to properly accommodate the button pads. But even then, they are going to feel quite mushy and just not great. The buttons still press okay, but I really don't like how they feel. So if you're sensitive to mushy buttons, the front shell may not be for you. The next difference on the front shell is the stick gate. It is a different shape than the original Nintendo shell. And I did do some testing on the values on this controller before I changed the shell, then compared them to the original Nintendo shell. They did shift a decent amount. This isn't as much of an issue with Phobs because you can just calibrate the stick to the stick gate, but that's something to keep in mind if you are planning on using a third-party front shell. While we're talking about the stick gate, I have read on the Gamecube Controller Discord that the front gate may not last as long. I haven't personally experienced this because I haven't worked with these shells a whole lot, but it is something to keep in mind and I felt like it was worth mentioning. All right, now on to the back shell. So the back shell seems to work pretty well. I didn't notice any issues with it. There's not really much to wear out on the back shell. It's just kind of there. Holds the internals in, hammer your triggers on it. So if you're looking for like a clear back shell on a budget that you may want to tint or something, then I feel like these Datafrog shells are pretty good if you only want to use the back shell. Though there is a pretty significant texture difference between a Nintendo front shell and a Datafrog back shell. So again, if that bothers you, maybe don't use one of those. But overall, if you're just looking for some casual play and to spice up your controller and you just want to use the back shell, I don't see any issue with using these types of shells on your controller. So it seems like a pretty decent budget option. It really depends on what you're looking for in a controller. I think that pretty much covers everything I want to talk about today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.